In the previous video, we added in a test target. Now we're going to have a look at how we can set up and tear down before and after our tests. So we'll have a look at the life cycle of tests, having a look at setting up and tearing down. Then we'll create the code to run before and after each of our tests. And we'll create an in-memory core data store type so that we can allow the core data to simply sit in memory rather than on disk. In the previous video, we looked at how we can add a test target into our project. But now we want to start making use of the classes that we can then test. So let's see how we can do this. First of all, we're going to import core data. And then we're going to make use of the new @testable, which allows us to import the Swift project into our test target. So I'll put @testable import dreamseeker. When I do this, I now have access to all the classes within my project, including any private methods, without having to expose them as public. So let's create a couple of variables that we're going to work with. The first is my dream, and I set this as a dream. And the next, I'll create an object, which is going to be a dictionary of string any object. Let's create this empty for the moment, and then I'll jump across to our app delegate, and I'll copy the very first item within our initial dreams, and I'll paste this in here. Then, there are two very important methods that we make use of when we're running tests. The first of these is the setup. This sets up any code that we want to use prior to running any test. This is called each time a new test is run. So we have 5 tests, then setup would be called each time before each of those tests. The second of these is tear down, and this pulls down any code after the test is run. Again, this is called at the end of each test. Now within our setup, we want to make use of core data. In previous videos, we've created core data on disk. However, what we really want to do is to make sure that when we call this in a test, it's an in-memory store type. So in order to make this happen, let's make a couple of changes to our core data manager. So I'm going to scroll to the top. I'll create a new variable called store type, and I'll set this as NSQLite store type. And I'll copy this variable, and I'll put self.storeType. Okay, now let's go back into our setup method. Let's create a shared instance of our core data manager. So I'll put let core data equals core data manager dot shared manager. And then I'll set the core data manager dot store type to be equal to NS in memory store type. Then I'll get the manage object context and unwrap this, and I'll get the entity as an NS entity description dot entity for name dream, and pass in this manage object context and unwrap this. And then I'll instantiate this dream as a dream with the entity as entity and insert it into the manage object context. And then within the teardown, I'll again call the core data manager. So let core data equals core data manager dot shared manager, and I'll get the manage object context and delete the dream. And that's it. We've created our setup and our teardown, which will be run before and after each one of our tests. So, we've got everything prepared. We have our setup and our teardown. In the next video, we're going to have a look at how we can use xcassert to validate our code.